First, there are now 6,394 confirmed cases across the country. The national death toll remains at 61. New cases reported in New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland, but again, all of those numbers relatively small considering what we've seen just a couple of weeks ago. Tasmania and the ACT both have no new cases. We're yet to get up-to-date figures for WA, SA and the Northern Territory, but so far the news is good and the curve continues to flatten. Have a look at these numbers. As I say, back in late March 28, that was 460. Since then, the gradual decline. In the last 48 hours, of course, we've been in the Easter long weekend, so some expectation that the testing has been lower than otherwise it would have been. Either way, the curve is very encouraging indeed. Let's bring in our political editor, Andrew Clennell, this afternoon. Andrew, lots to talk about. Let's start on the schools front because we've been discussing this now for weeks. Will they reopen in term 2 or won't they?
I think there's a very good chance, Kieran. Sky News can reveal plans are afoot to have more students at school from mid-May. There are plans for schools to start returning to something closer to normal in as little as a month's time. In New South Wales, a possible return of more students to schools would begin from week 3 of term 2, which begins May 18, sources have told Sky News. Sky News understands that those plans are being drawn up, despite Queensland and Victoria saying that online learning will be in place for at least a month from now. If it was up to Prime Minister Scott Morrison, Kieran, the PM would pretty much have all children compulsorily back at school from the start of term 2, or at least have parents encouraged to have children at school rather than have them told to keep kids home unless they can't because they are essential workers or the vulnerable. That's what's happening at the moment. Victoria is the most bullish on continuing to keep children at home, with its Premier Daniel Andrews not wanting hundreds of thousands of students travelling around amid fears of spreading the virus. The Teachers Federation in New South Wales has flagged a system where Year 12 and kindergarten could return first, a staggered approach, then other grades. National Cabinet will discuss schools reopening again this Thursday. Key to all of it will be measures to ensure teachers are safe, so proper supplies of hand sanitizer, etc. We know the evidence so far is the virus does not seem to transmit as much between children. Also on the agenda at National Cabinet, what tests might be applied for the lifting of restrictions on certain sectors and certain regions, things like restaurant and cafe openings. It's been put to me one measure being discussed is when a region records 0 COVID-19 cases for 14 days, that could be enough to trigger some reopenings. It's also been put to me you might have restrictions in place in regions where there are more retired people. On the schools front, Scott Morrison has given an interview to Chris Kenny, which he'll be airing on his show at 5 p.m. today. Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister said about schools in that program, in that interview.
If online and distance learning was a better way of delivering education, then that's what we'd do all the time. We wouldn't have schools. We wouldn't have all of that infrastructure and all of these sorts of things. Of course, teaching in the classroom, teaching face-to-face, teaching in that environment with kids together is a positive environment for children to learn. And I think, this has got to be a high priority, particularly given the health advice and the risk to children. We've got to get those issues right for the safety of teachers. That's fair enough. But ultimately, we need to get kids back into school, and that's increasingly being recognised around the world. The French president has made similar comments today, but the health advice has been very consistent. Getting kids back into school will also free up, I think, more opportunities in our economy.
So the PM's been very consistent on this all along. He wants kids at school. It's really the states that push the issue on sort of the half closures or three-quarter closures. Although if you listen to Brendan Murphy, the Chief Medical Officer, and we'll talk about his interesting evidence on other matters in a moment, he was telling a New Zealand Parliamentary Committee today that parents push the issue in terms of school closures by taking their kids out. Have a listen.
One of the wonderful things about our response is that governments they've not rejected any of our advice. I think with the schools, most of the state governments actually didn't want to close the schools. It was the parents and the teachers who closed the schools. And the governments have responded to that by introducing online activities.
So, interesting view there from the Chief Medical Officer. We know the Prime Minister's position, as you heard very strongly there again with Chris Kenny, and that interview, as you said, just after 5 o'clock will be on the Kenny Report.